No, I'm not. But it's
Don't worry,
okay.
I won't bang it.
I'm used.
Deja vu.
I'm usually not ready. Okay. Ready for roll call?
Thanks everybody for coming. Town of Palmyra Special Town Board Meeting, Tuesday, November 25th, 2025, 6 p.m. Palmyra Town Hall, W1125, Highway 106, Palmyra, Wisconsin 53156. Town Board Meeting agenda is amended as of 11/24/25, 3:20 p.m. Meeting time, start time has changed from 5 to 6 p.m. and I do appreciate everybody's flexibility of that, especially Josh and Michelle. I had something come up where I had to sub for getting my granddaughter somewhere. Anyway, call to order, that's what I just did. Certification of compliance with open meeting laws.
Yes, it was properly posted.
Roll call.
Gajewski?
Here.
Martins?
Here. Pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Got two agenda items tonight. First is a discussion and possible action on quote received from Northwest Services for Little Prairie Road shoulder repairs. Josh.
So about 2 months ago, I believe, we had a much broader scope of potential work to do on Little Prairie Road. Met with both Ron and Ron and Bob a week or so ago. Went through with them essentially called the worst of the worst areas for Little Prairie. Generally speaking, there's 6 corners or downhill areas that we've got anywhere between 4 and 10 inches wide off the edge of the pavement and 4 to, in some spots, almost 10 inches deep that need to be filled in. Scope of work is very similar to what we requested the county to do in 2024 that was done with reclaimed asphalt. Unfortunately, the weather turned and it was never warm enough to actually get run in real hard to set up. Right now, the scope that they provided is a estimate based on time and material with a do not exceed limit put on it of $6,787. Obviously, if each one of those is less, the shouldering machine, dump truck, broom roller, all of that, quite frankly, is probably pretty close to what the hours would be. The amount of stone is going to be determined by the amount of stone it takes to fill in and the amount of labor. Hopefully will be less than what they've got itemized, but that's kind of where we had left it at a budget meeting, like I said, a month or so ago, 2 months ago, when we had that initial quote. So included in this also, generally from the mobilization piece of it, is at the apron of Dallin Lane. I'm going to call it the eastbound lane or the inbound lane on Dallin Lane, that they would fill in a pothole that is about 4 foot round and 8 inches deep right at the apron. That's kind of come and gone. My shoveling over the summertime has worked, and then it rains and it doesn't and everything. So that would be on there, and I also want to talk to them. There's one other spot on Blue Spring Lake Drive that would take 2 or 3 wheelbarrow pulls of gravel to put in there and then run over essentially the truck. We don't need a roller or anything like that for it. But at this point, that would kind of be the scope, similar to other work that we've had done. If it's something we want to do this year, I would suggest that we reallocate funding out of ice and snow towards this, based on where that line item budget is versus the rest of what we have. So,
Two questions. One, I think what you just said stated that, confirm that this is a safety issue. Now wait till spring.
technically, it's not if people stay on the road. But because of where it's located
Sure.
and because of the fact that it already is more or less tire tracked out, I'm assuming that people are utilizing the unpaved portion of the road to navigate as well.
And the
And at
slippery
that
road,
point,
and the slippery road's coming up. And
Yeah.
two, it temped out last year for the county to take care of it.
yes.
Are we still able to get it done this year, given the temperature's gonna drop tomorrow?
So, rather than using reclaimed asphalt, this year we would put in 1/2-inch traffic bond gravel, which is limestone gravel. Pending the decision here, I spoke with Ron early, actually it was yesterday, actually it might have been Sunday. They more or less have tomorrow, and after that, they're gonna transition all their trucks into ice and snow. So if we want it done, it'll be done more or less by the end of tomorrow, so that they can transition their last 2 trucks over to be able to plow it. So,
Okay, and if, will this last through the spring, through the winter, and through the spring? Or are we just gonna have to repair it again for, and basically spend $6,800? Granted, for a safety issue, but, or will this last through the spring and summer?
it hopefully will last, yes.
Alright, yeah,
Obviously can't guarantee any
Of course.
gigantic, because of where the issues are, it's more or less coming, you're leaving the village going up, right before you make the bend to kind of flatten out by Horseman's, there's a relatively significant spot on the, I'll call it left-hand side, if you're heading out towards that end. You get past the Horse Riders Campground, and it's both sides of the road as you make the next curve and bend up the hill. You go flat through there, it's the next set of bends the other direction, so realistically, if we get a 7-inch rainfall, there's not a whole lot of anything that's really gonna stay there, but one of the things that we may be able to do with some of this next year is I chatted real early in the year with Ron about them getting into doing crack filling and stuff like that, or a farmer or somebody else, is to actually have, call it spray patching done over the shoulders to try to help from just water erosion, from getting under it and washing it out.
So, to continue that comment, Josh, so next spring, they're thinking about spraying something to hold, hopefully that in the place for another year maybe?
Well, unfortunately, at the moment, it was not in the proposed budget that was presented at the public hearing, and given the results of the public hearing, I don't know where we would come up with the additional funding that wasn't allocated before to be able to do that, but it's a discussion for at some point in time.
So it's basically, it's a temporary, it might be a year, it could be maybe a year and a half, 2 years before we have to address it again.
It could be 5 years too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It just really depends on what's going on.
and my last question is related to the county. When the county repaired the road.
Yep.
Did they leave anything undone where this really should be their responsibility?
And cost for anybody who cares, the county's bill was a little north of $7,000. I want to say it was like $73 or $7,400 to do more or less these exact same areas. And so the cost for comparison between who's doing the work, this is competitive within that spectrum. I would move that we approve the estimate from Northwest Services dated 11/13/25 for an amount not to exceed $6,787, and to use funding available through the ice and snow account.
I second that. Is this
Roll
roll
call?
call?
Martinez,
Aye.
Mayeski.
Aye.
And any other discussion? Discussion passes. We just need me to sign this here.
Sure, that'd be fine.
Watch this. I'll have to put in a photocopy.
It's today.
25.
About 11:25, not 10:20. Okay, second and final subject for the night is discussion, possible amendments to, possible action on, and possible adoption of the 2026 Town of Palmyra budget. Josh.
I'm gonna ask for a 2-minute hiatus here. Okay, when we last met about budget, we had presented, for the public hearing. Again, that was on the 20th of November. We had 101 signed in electors attend that meeting. The town board requested a levy exceedance of $89,500, and the vote on that was 58 no and 43 yes. So the default levy limit goes back to $714,834. That also went up for vote, and it was passed 60 yes and curiously 29 no. But nonetheless, the levy has been adopted. The next step of this process would be to adopt the budget. A couple of different things. Pending the outcome, or finalization I should say, of the fire EMS contract, I have penned in the recalculated third decimal place 33.333% factor to be reflected in the expense column, or expense line item I should say, of 50015 fire EMS protection to read 376793 rather than what had been presented during the public hearing, because we had not yet met with the village. Additionally, this is where we get into Josh generally making a motion, which would be to also revise expense account item 51530, which is assessor, to reflect the cost inclusive of the revaluation, which is $17,700 additional, which would total for that account line item $31,200.
And that's the last column, 2026 proposed, right?
Correct.
31.2?
Correct.
Okay.
So we technically have two revisions, one for fire and EMS that reads 376793. I would also propose the assessor line item change to 31,200. I would also suggest that we remove $40,000 worth of tree service expense from account 53316 to zero that for a proposed 2026 budget. I would also suggest that we zero emergency management, which is account 53400. I would also suggest that, although it is not an account within the GL, at the bottom of the expense we had $23 going to fund balance. I would suggest we also zero that, which means the revised amount that we become short is $53,482 in the red, and that we apply on the revenue side.
Did you print that out? Because these numbers are...
I printed out the last version so you can mark it up as we go. I had Michelle print it out.
Yeah, but I've got these two.
Yep.
But I'm not ready to take these to zero, so
Okay.
what's the new bottom line?
The new bottom line becomes.
Where's the 53?
So the new bottom line becomes 1 million on expenses, 1,110,708. Which means with the automatically reduced general property tax at the top of the revenue page.
I think we're gonna have to put this on the screen so I can follow along.
That's fine.
It's just
If you
easier
get-
watching me do what you do and so I can see what
Yep.
you're doing.
That's fair.
I apologize, but I'm gonna move over here, so my back will be to you. I apologize for that, thank you.
You could sit on the end there, Rob, then you would feel so bad.
That's true, I can do that. What would I do without you?
There we go. So, we'll walk through this a little bit, maybe a little bit easier here. So, our $804,000 amount at the top that was presented in the budget automatically defaults back to 714,834 because the levy exceedance was not approved. So that lowers our revenue.
Yeah.
We generally instantly go in the hole by $89,500.
Yeah.
Let me do that for a minute. So here's the revised fire and EMS number per the mutual aid calculation, 376,793. That is the inclusive amount, 31,200 for assessor to include the reval. Which if I'm just gonna do this for practical purposes. Okay. That's generally where we ended up. The way that was. So to get rid of this ugly number at the top, I'm suggesting that we take this to 0, which is tree service, that we take emergency management, refunding that designated 50 grand to 0, which means we have 35, and then kind of the spare change $23 general fund allocation to 0, which means we're 53 grand in the hole. Then, on the revenue side, to 0 that budget is to put in 53482 of cash we have currently in our LGIP. This is year to date 2025, 92,620. The 85,241 is that amount minus what we're anticipating using to close out 2025. And if we, yeah, thanks, Excel, got it. If we do this 53,482 of fund balance applied, it would take the LGIP account down to 31,759. So those would be my suggested changes. Parliamentarily, we do need a second to start discussion.
That was a motion, or you're just
That was
making suggestions?
That was a motion to make those changes to the budget.
And in order to talk about those, we have to have a second.
Yes.
Second. Further discussion.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
So, we still have a couple of things, generally large ticket and outstanding, even though we have only 5 weeks of this year left. One of which, as soon as I find it, right here, at the top of the list, is ice and snow. Currently, well, we've got a little less than that technically, but dollars for dollars within the budget, whether it's used for ice and snow or whether it's used for re-shouldering a road, that money is generally accounted for, the $6,700. So we've got roughly $43,000 that we anticipate using between now and the end of December for ice and snow management and removal.
Based on prior year's cost per incident, and obviously it depends on how much snow we get. If we get 3 inches, 4 inches, that's one cost. If we get 18 or 20 inches, that's a whole different ballgame.
Right. So
Average, how many plowings does that remainder of 43,000 leave us with?
So we had figured 5 snowfalls at 10 grand a piece. That 10 grand a piece is a relatively comfortable estimate from what you just said. They may go out and they may pre-treat with brine once. We may not pre-treat with brine at all because it's going to be warm enough yet, and they go out and plow and salt. It could be they go out and brine and plow and salt and come back the next day and scrape more crap off the roads. It's just,
Yeah, we don't know
crystal ball,
until something gets here.
so roughly 4.5
With
6-inch snowfalls with a day-and-a-half long response, if you want to call it that.
is Saturday supposed to amount to anything?
At this point, it depends on who you ask. We are in the zone of impact. The zone of absoluteness, I don't think is going to come out until probably Thursday at this point. But pending all of this, here's my mindset, is that with 43 grand, if it's not utilized in ice and snow, it generally would default to fund balance. Okay, because it's at that point unallocated within the 25 budget, or I shouldn't say that, it's unused within the 25 budget.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than, it's the same net effect to a point. If we apply 53,482 of our LGIP, right, between year end 2025, and theoretically if everything else comes in true, revenues and expenses for 2026, we would lower that LGIP amount to 31,800, call it 32,000. If we don't use the 43 for ice and snow in 25, that number then goes back to 75,000 if we had 43 back in, which is still lowering and using money out of fund balance, and from a perspective of also, quite frankly, not knowing how our insurance coverage is going to pan out, that line item may also be dramatically different.
Sure.
Which could be an additional $37,000 that we've allocated within the 2025 budget that could make that number then 110,000 in the LGIP if we designated to put it there. That all being said, because of those 2 big variables, I think if we get through December and potentially January, because of the snow duration type of thing, and get a feel for what potentially the rest of that winter would look like. Again, we budgeted $160,000 for ice and snow. And if patterns trend like they have, we know that that kind of splits 2/3 in the front half of the year and 1/3 in the back half of the year as far as ice and snow goes. If we stay in that 2/3 trend at the front half, there's at least a little bit of solace knowing that the back third of that season is going to come out okay. We can do a budget amendment in February or March when we've got a better handle on both of those months. Would be, if we did it in March, would obviously be very upfront and knowing where we landed more or less for the winter. And we can figure out at that point, can we then take the 43 grand from ice and snow in 2025 and put 40 grand back in the budget for tree service in 2026?
Well,
So it's
I
a
understand what
delayed
you're saying.
adoption, you know.
I think the odds of everything working out perfectly the way you say, very little, if any, ice and snow, very little or no tree service needed, are very, very slim. So I think we should look at these one at a time. Finish the 25 with the ice and snow, figure what we're gonna do there, and then look at these ones. I'm very uncomfortable putting 0 in for trees and 0 in for emergency management. We're rolling the dice. So the flip side, if we don't wanna do that, if we wanna leave it in there, then we just have to be prepared to go and have debt service to cover it. And we generally really don't want to borrow to cover operations expenses.
Correct.
But given the fact that the levy increase did not pass and we have to take care of some of these things, I don't know what other options we're gonna have. So I guess for 25, I'd rather leave the 50,000 alone and take it out of the general fund. Because like you said, we can always put it'll go automatically back to the general fund if we don't use it for ice and snow.
Which is what we've got set up right now.
I wouldn't change anything in the 25, just my opinion.
Correct, which I have not, correct, I agree with you.
Okay. 26.
The only, here's.
26, zeroing out roads.
Yep.
Okay, that
Well,
was a decision we made.
zero.
Because that's something we can control other than, you know, an emergency situation damaging a road, right? Tree service, we can manage a portion of that, meaning anything that we would do from a tree management standpoint. But from storms and things like that, we can't control that. Last I heard it. So,
I can't, yeah.
well, Michelle's pretty good at most things. So, so I'm just uncomfortable zeroing those out now. Whether we zero them out now and then we address the debt service if things happen and make amendments, that's how we want to approach it, fine. We want to just leave it in there and, you know, address debt service right away. Those, you see, those as the two options. Right?
Correct, I would agree with you, yep. So for the here and now part, the reason why I did this is to not belabor the point of adopting a budget, number one. The little bit that we have, the 32,000, that would provide some level if we wanted to, because everything is cyclical. 2/3 of our revenue, since it's last Thursday,
Yeah.
2/3 of our revenue comes in the first third of the year, and we go way down, and then we get a 20% and a 15% in the last third quarter-ish.
Right.
So if we stay within the line item budget for, I'm calling it expenses, the revenues are generally, for the most part, a guaranteed thing, right? Because we don't have any service dependent revenue. It's taxes, it's GTA, it's state share revenue. It's generally kind of a given, right?
Yeah.
We can figure out, we could figure out as the year goes along, whether or not, I'm just gonna say, 10 trees fall over and we know we gotta get it cleaned up. It's kind of a statutory requirement of ours. So there's not really a decision to be made. Let's say halfway through the year, we cut that 32 grand down to 15. Because we've used money out of the LGIP to fund operations. We could look at the timing of line of credit payments and everything else, because if we hold that money in January, we pay interest on it from that day until the payment date in July. If we pull the money in June, then we've only got the 1 month in between. Rather than, to me, it's the same thing, but it's different, and the only difference is how comfortable are we in using fund balance to fund the balance of our budget, knowing that we can't control if a tree falls over, and if we have zero budgeted, we're budgeting that there's zero, but we're still reacting to the requirement of what we need to do to clear the roads up, and the ultimate fallback of that is to use fund balance rather than a designated expense amount. That way, potentially after July of next year, if, let's just say midway through the year, we're not comfortable with what the standing, because again, theoretically, at January 1, our LGIP amount is going to be $85,000, right? And throughout the course of these expenses to cover $54,000 of it, we need to pull some, right? And realistically, that 54 grand is, let's just make it easy. We have a quarterly payment for fire and EMS.
That's just what I
Right,
was gonna
so
say,
we
let's
get
not
to-
lose sight, we don't pay the 376 January 1.
Correct.
So it's
It's a
quarterly,
cash
so we
flow.
really have more
Yes.
allocated. So at some point, as we get closer to those final payments, we have to look at debt service at that point.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
That is the hallway that I was walking down, was that at some point, Q3, early Q3, we look at it and say, okay, where are we at with ice and snow? Where are we at with how many trees fell over? Where are we at with everything else? And figure out, do we want to keep the fund balance closer to 85, where we started at the beginning of the year, and service part of the operations with that remaining line of credit amount? Or can, like, has the world dropped an Easter egg in our lap and we don't have to use either one of them? You know, there's a possibility.
And interest rates drop,
All sorts of,
different things.
Yeah.
I'm very concerned about taking our, as I know you are, taking our fund balance that low, potentially.
yeah,
We've done,
there's nothing there.
we've done a decent job of taking it from basically zero up to $100,000 basically, okay? And it should be at in 18 months, should be at 250 based on norm or goal.
Yeah.
25% of your budget, so it should be around 250, 270. It hasn't been there in a long, long time.
Correct.
But we were making progress to it. Obviously, 26 is going to be a challenging year for us. We can also, from a tree management perspective, again, depending on how ice and snow goes, if we only have 2 snow events, but some of them include trees, we could always pull the funds out of ice and snow as well.
Yeah.
The closer we get to the end of the year. So that gives us a little bit of a buffer as well.
Yes. Rather than drawing the LGIP fund balance from 85 down to 32, there's a chance that it goes up to 120, and then we end up back at 85 at the end of next year. Debt service additional free.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So those, to me, those are the things as far as playing, as far as playing the cash flow game of when they come in, because you're 100% right. The 377 is not due January 1st. It's January, March.
There's one other area I want to talk about, and I don't want to talk about it. I certainly would prefer not to go there, but all of our donations. The library,